Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the California Nevada Chat of Friday, July 21st, 2023. My name is Len Dumas, Executive Director for the Northern California section of the PGA of America. And on behalf of our section and our President, Eric Lippert, and our colleagues, Executive Director, CEO Nikki Gatch, and President Eric Lohman of the Southern California section, and our Executive Director Emeritus Tom Addis. We thank you once again for your continued support of our California Nevada chats, and certainly our on-air team of Steve Monday, Shelby Zell, and Bryce Sieber for making sure that we're coming through you loud and clear once a month on our Fridays. During our last chat, we were between the men's and women's U.S. Open, which is a very exciting time. And today we find ourselves in the midst of a couple of second rounds of the Open Championship at Royal Liverpool, of course, and locally, the Barracuda Championship right here at Old Greenwood Golf Course in Truckee. And as many of you know, we're rooting for Michael Duncan, a member of the Northern California section who earned his spot in the Barracuda by way of being our 2023 match play champion. Certainly, congratulations to Allison Corpus for a great victory, which we'll talk about soon at the first historic event, right? At the first U.S. Women's Open at Pebble Beach for first of a long-standing relationship. And we thank our guests this morning for their time and being with us to talk about these many, many topics. Fred Paul. Fred is president of the United States Golf Association. Fred, thank you. And of course, Greg Kessler, Director for Public Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association. So President Lippert is out of town. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Southern California PGA Executive Director, CEO, Nikki Gatch for some opening remarks. Nikki? Yeah.
Thanks, Len. It's great to see everybody. I'll keep it short and sweet because we've got a great lineup. Mr. Papal, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been a busy man as of late, and I'm sure, for all the years so far. So we look forward to chatting with you, getting to know you a little bit better, and just talk about our game. So I appreciate you being here. Craig, we always appreciate you being here. I don't want to leave you out. We certainly, advocacy efforts are super important here in our state. And Craig just does such a great job of keeping us informed and letting us know what's going on. So without that, Len, I'll turn it back over to you and we'll start the conversation.
Yeah, let's go. And Fred, Nikki, and I will tag team you here. And first off, welcome. It's great to meet you, and what an exciting time for a number of things. Certainly yourself as president, but the two championships, two majors right here in California, and one yet to come, the U.S. Women's Amateur at Bel Air in just a few weeks. But Fred, please tell us more about you and that moment when it seemed like golf was going to be your calling.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and so good to be here with you all. I always enjoyed being, in the community of golf. I always, one of the things I love to say is, when you fit, you can actually feel it. And for all of us who love golf, when we're with other golfers, we know we fit, and that doesn't matter where you're at. If you drop me off to the local driving range or to the local club, you kind of know you're at home when you're in the community of golf. So it's good to be here with you all. Long before I was a golfer, golf was changing my life. My mother worked at the local golf club in my hometown of Nassau, and I got to know a lot of these gentlemen in my teenage years. And it's interesting that goodness that you feel in the game, that these local golfers in my hometown established a scholarship to help kids in the community go to college, and I was one of those kids. And so even though in my teenage years I was not a golfer, these golfers changed my life. And I came to golf later in life as a young executive. I wanted to have an opportunity to spend time with other people in my community, and golf was kind of the thing that brought me through. And so I always say, the first time you hit a driver square in the face and that ball takes the right flight, and there's something about the transfer of energy, there's something about the imagination, there's something about a flight of a golf ball that if it sends the adrenaline down your spine, that, you're hooked and you go down the rabbit hole of golf. And, the last 10, 15 years, I've gone deep down that rabbit hole, building a golf club, building a golf course, spending, more hours than I care to admit working on my game. And, my journey in golf has been one that I think is reflective of most people who love golf, that it's become, part of my, sort of mental health. It's part religion, it's part friendship, it's part, sort of physical fitness, but it's certainly become part of the way I've lived my life. It's not just a game I play, it's kind of the way I've lived my life over the last decade or so. And so it's been an honor and a privilege to be able to serve this game and give back a little, because this game has given me so much. And so anyway, it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you all this morning.
Yeah, Fred, thank you. No surprise you're being incredibly modest when talking about that giving back. Here's what we know, that you are, as a matter of fact, a registered architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows. But also, Fred, I'd love for you to discuss you, as a member of the Board of Trustees who helped build Trinity Forest Golf Club in Dallas, which has hosted the Byron Nelson, and also served as host to the Southern Methodist SMU's golf programs and continued in turn. So you've been doing this for a while, and talk about how that all came about. Fred, just tremendous.
Yeah, my mother used to like to say that your future is planted in you. When you're young, your future gets planted in you. And so I talked about how these men helped and women helped me go to college. Well, when we had the opportunity, our company has been in Dallas, headquartered in Dallas for the last 110 years. We work all over the US, but we had an opportunity to build a golf club, to bring the Byron Nelson back to Dallas, because the Byron Nelson had sort of gone off into the suburbs. We wanted to bring it back. We wanted to build a club, though, that would do more than just host a prestigious golf event. We wanted a club that actually could inspire our community. And so we selected a site in a part of town in Dallas that needed a little inspiration. We built a first tee center because we wanted, to expose the kids in our community to golf. And we wanted, in addition to hosting the Byron Nelson and hosting this first tee site, we wanted to make our golf course available to the local charities so that we could raise money through golf. And then we wanted to inspire the next generation of elite golfers by offering them an opportunity to play golf at our center. So we had these 4 objectives to actually host a first tee chapter and inspire the next generation of golfers and get what I call the top of the funnel wider by welcoming more young kids into the game. We wanted to host SMU's, sort of golf program. So we built them their own clubhouse, and they are hosted at, and really they are headquartered at Trinity Forest. We wanted to host the Byron Nelson. Byron Nelson, along with Ben Hogan, are very important to Texas golf. You could argue that they are sort of the godfathers of Texas golf. And so we wanted to bring that championship back into Texas proper. And then we wanted to raise money for all the local charities through golf by making our golf course available every Monday for charitable play. And so I got to, along with 4 or 5 other gentlemen, be the sort of anchor investors and put this club together. And, we hope that that same goodness that we've been beneficiaries of in the game gets to spread back through the community of North Texas, through us and through our club. And so that's kind of where my journey in golf administration began. In 2012, 2013, 2014, we were putting this thing together, and it's become a really important part of my life. We had the audacity. We also thought that the USGA should bring the US Open back to Dallas and play it at our course. And, we, at that time, probably a little naive about what it takes to host the US Open. And so that's where my journey with the USGA began. I sort of, like many other host sites, I became one of those guys kind of, pinging on the USGA to come look at our course and look at our club and look at all the things we were doing in North Texas. Well, they said no to the US Open, but they said yes to me. And so in 2018, I interviewed for the executive committee and became a member of the board in 2019. And so anyway, that's the you know, it's interesting how you kind of have your own ideas about, you know, what your service might yield. And in our case, we were hoping that we would build something worthy of hosting a US Open. So what started off with, hey, let's host a US Open, quickly became, hey, come serve on our board. So instead of me selling them, they sort of sold me.
Well, I think they had made a great choice. Remind us again how long your term is. You just started your presidency, correct?
Yeah.
How long is your term?
Yeah. So in the mid 2015, 2016, the USGA changed its charter. You know, serving on the executive committee always has been and continues to be a privilege, but it was really dicey because executive committee members served from year to year. So you really served at the behest of the nominating committee, which was all the past presidents. We sort of changed the structure so that you wouldn't be on these year-to-year deals, which really made the people serving on the board feel really vulnerable because your term could be over, you know, one bad meeting and your term could be over. Right. And so we now each of the 15 members serve 3-year terms. And the presidency now is a 3-year term with a 1-year president-elect term. So I'm in the first year of my 3-year term. But each person that serves on the executive committee now serves staggered 3-year terms.
Okay, great. Let's talk about your presidency. I mean, you kicked it off in a big way. We were super excited to have you here in our state a couple of times and coming up again next month with the Women's Am at Bel Air. But any goals or vision or accomplishments, you know, when you look back 3 years from now, that you want to say, all right, I want to make this mark during my term?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing is I want to be a good chairman of the board. You know, the USGA president really is the chairman of the board. You know, it's very confusing because a lot of my family and friends say, hey, man, you gave up your job as CEO of BEC to go run the USGA, but really the president is the lead volunteer. And I think like with all, you know, volunteers who volunteer for nonprofits that we believe in, my first objective is to really be a, you know, raging supporter of our staff and our professional team, which is led by Mike Wan. And so my first objective is to just be the best chairman that Mike Wan would ever want and to support the strategy that he is running, which as a day-to-day leader is really unifying the game by, you know, modernizing the rules and making sure that we have a nice umbrella of rules by which to play. Probably the most sensational of which is our investigating the equipment and trying to modernize, you know, the equipment standards so that we have a sustainable game into the future. Obviously, we want to showcase the game, and you know the way we do that is by conducting great championships, 3 of which are in the state of California this year. You know, we govern, and you know, part of that governance is just really the structure along with the RNA to make sure that, you know, we have order in the game, and you know, nobody likes to be governed, but without governance, the game of golf, you know, would kind of, you know, be chaotic pretty quickly. And then we want to make, you know, some key investments in our future so we continue to advance the game. And I think that's kind of the strategy of the USGA and, you know, what we've been working under. I, in particular, have this personal bent on the advanced side of our strategy, which is to fling the doors of this game as wide open as possible and to hold them open as long as we can. So we welcome as many people into the game as possible. And that's not just, you know, kids of color or women, that's everyone. But, you know, surprise, surprise, during COVID, we've had this amazing boom in golf. And I think COVID's been part of it, but I also think Top Golf and these alternate, you know, off-site venues have been a part of that explosion as well. And so if you went back to 2018, according to the National Golf Foundation, 2018, 2019, 25 million Americans would have identified themselves as golfers. Today, over 40 million Americans identify themselves as golfers, i.e. they have played golf more than 5 times in a year. So that 15 million people that came to golf during COVID represents a real, step change forward in the game. And we want to just bear hug that 15 million people that have showed up and make sure that we continue to do all that we can to invest as much as we can to retain that new, 15 million, but also to keep welcoming more and more people in. And here's the thing that's so cool about this. The new 1/3 that's entered the American game, almost half of those folks are women and minorities. So they're the very people that we've been, trying to attract into the game. And I think we need to just do all that we can to continue to showcase and put, all of the effort in to make sure that, everyone who lives in our communities know that this is a game for them. And that's why we're working so hard to put the women on the greatest stages, to continue to tell the stories, so that the future Allison Corpusas know that we want them in this game as much as anyone. And we want all the young kids out there, whether they are living in the city or living in a rural condition, whether they're white kids or black kids or Hispanic kids, we want all of our kids to know that this is truly a game for you. And what is great about golf is, who golf puts you with and what golf makes you into. And so we think that's great. We think it's the greatest game that's ever been invented. And we think it makes, it makes people into, great human beings. And we hope as a, matter of focus over the next 3 years to just keep opening this game up to more and more people.
Fred, let's talk a little bit about those championships, because I think they're great examples of what you just talked about, both the men's and women's open. They're 3 weeks apart. They're a couple 100 miles apart, but yet they proved once again that the tournament starts on the back nine on Sunday, with Wyndham Clark hanging on to win the men's open. And then of course, Allison Corpus hanging on. There's always a couple of chargers. And as you look at those, Fred, given the different parts of California, different cultures and such, but the game is the same, the rules are the same. I mean, as a fan, right, they were incredibly exciting events. And how did you view that? One, as a golfer yourself, again, two, as a fan, and then three, as the head of the United States Golf Association?
Yeah, I mean, I think the U.S. Open has its own, sort of brand and its own, structure. And if I would think about the strategy of the USGA, we want to conduct the world's greatest championships on America's greatest golf courses. And our U.S. Open strategy is same for men and women, which is to truly create, the stiffest and sternest test in golf. And for us, what that means is we want the players to dirty up all 14 clubs in their bag. We want to set the golf courses up so that it actually makes you use all of your clubs, but that the 15th club, this right here, becomes a lot, sort of bigger advantage in terms of separation of players. And so I thought the U.S. Open was great. It's funny. You could imagine, like day one, how my phone just exploded. Len, Nikki, like friends from all around the country, like, oh my gosh, these guys went 8 under on you day one. Your first year as president, like what's going on, and there's part of LACC where if it's not firm and the wind does not blow, that it is gettable. We're dealing with the greatest players on earth, and we just had the unfortunate, sort of where the forecast went the other way on us. And over the last 5-6 years, we've really focused on, showcasing the best of the architecture of the course. So in other words, 10 years ago, the USGA would have showed up with, pallets and pallets of fescue. We would have planted more rough. We would have narrowed all the fairways. We would have speeded the greens. We would have made a USGA-fication of your golf course in order to conduct the US Open. We're not doing that anymore. What we think, we want to actually showcase the great architecture that exists in our country. We want to play the courses as the best versions of themselves instead of our version of your course. And so at LACC, it's just wide and it's drivable. And if it's not firm, they can control their ball on the ground much easier. And so they got us on the first day. But once the rain subsided and the sun came out and we were able to firm it up and sort of put the holes where we thought, because, you know, day one, you're getting 256 players around, you've got to kind of have the holes be more accessible on day 1 and 2. But as the championship went on, you know, I think we would all agree that the leaderboard and the quality of the leaderboard, that the cream rose to the top. You had Ricky, you had Rory, you had Wyndham, you had players who were playing the best, and Wyndham Clark, certainly coming into the U.S. Open, was one of the best players in the world. He had already won, and he had already top 5 along the way. So that's what we look at, that there are no fluke winners of the U.S. Open, that the quality of the golf course, the setup, and the tests that we offer, actually, that the best players in the world rise to the top. Similarly, go over to U.S. Women's Open. I mean, it is hard to argue Alison Corpus's season that she was having. You know, I think she had already gotten to the leadership spot at another major earlier in the year, and sort of came apart on the last day. But she had been playing good along the way. I think there were only 5 or 6 players on the par during the Women's Open at Pebble. We wanted to showcase Pebble Beach. We wanted the women to hit similar shots that the men did, so that they've got the appropriate distances for themselves. We gave them the very same hole locations that we always use. And I think it was just a real statement to actually put the women on the exact same stage, give them the same attention and the same setup. Look, I'm the you know, father of 2 daughters. Now, people say, oh, you shouldn't care about women's golf just because you have daughters. You know, I would care about women's golf anyway. I got 4 sisters too, by the way, but I would care about women's golf anyway. Even if I had all sons and all brothers, I would care about women's golf because I care about equality. I care about fairness. I know that the greatness of America is when we all come together. So I would care about these things anyway. But the fact that I was walking around there on a Sunday with my 2 daughters, watching the best women play golf on the same stage, I did not have to explain to them that we care just as much about the women's game as the men. When you have it, you don't have to explain it. And, you know, for us, that's something that we want to keep leading the way on as the USGA. We have this wonderful platform. We have this wonderful identity. And we think one of the greatest things we can do is actually use our platform to showcase what we think the world should look like. And there is no doubt when you turned on the broadcast, 12 hours on Saturday, 11 hours on Sunday on primetime TV, that when we put a great showcase on, that the drama unfolds and that people will watch. It was the greatest women's golf audience, I think, in the history of golf. And that's what we want to keep doing. We want to keep showcasing. We want to keep welcoming other kids in. And when we announce that the Curtis Cup is going to Pine Valley, the #1 golf course on earth, some 12-year-old who's working on their game right now is going to get the opportunity to play a Curtis Cup at Pine Valley, which would have been unheard of, you know, even 4 years ago. So these are the kind of things that we get excited about. And, you know, I, in particular, along with our team, I would tell you, it's not me. You know, leaders get way too much credit. It's the team that gets fired up about this. And so, yeah, the only thing you guys got to help me with is coming back to Bel Air. I just want the state of California not to send me a income tax statement. You know, I feel like I've been in California more than half my year. So anyway, I hope I'm not going on too long, but we get really enthusiastic about the things we're working on because it's good for golf, but more importantly, it's good for the people who play golf.
Appreciate that, friend. Appreciate your passion. And as a woman golfer and a PGA member, it's exciting for me to see how our game has evolved, and specifically the women's game, you know, to see all that you all are doing as the USGA, to see the PGA of America step up with the KPMG Women's PGA Championship and the venues that we're going to there, the Augusta Women's National. I mean, you know, these are things that I never thought as a young girl playing golf that I would ever see, right? So it's really, really cool. And I regret not getting up to Pebble, but hopefully I'll see you out at Bel Air for a day or two for the women's AM. Talk about, you know, bringing more people to the game and the exposure. I mean, this community legacy project that the USGA did in partnership with LA Country Club, certainly partnership with the SCGA and our foundation there. Talk to us about that, the impact that we're starting to make in the community and that we will see for many, many years to come, specifically at Maggie Hathaway.
Yeah, I mean, look, Maggie Hathaway is, you know, to me, it's one of the coolest things. Like, I think at the end of the day, you'll have these big rocks that you put in your jar on your way in and out. I think all of us who volunteer, but even all of us who work in golf for a living, we'd have to admit part of it is it's our passion for the game, whether you get paid from it or whether you don't. It's you work in golf because you're passionate about golf, and what you're most passionate about is what golf made you into, right? Like I'm gonna tell you right now, as a former college basketball player, I was not the most timely person. Golf made me, to pay more attention to being on time. Golf makes you, a more disciplined person. Golf has helped me deal with my own emotions. It's who golf makes you into. I was playing at Inverness Club this week, and I'm telling you, I've been working on my swing. I had the perfect outfit on. We had great breakfast. We had a great pleasantries. People introduced me. I gave some coins out. I mean, everything was perfect. And I mean, I've been hitting the ball good over the last 3 weeks, and I took my driver and shanked it straight out of bounds on my first shot. Okay. This is what golf makes you deal with success, failure. So all of us who love golf know that the thing we love most about golf is, one, it's hard. Two, if you actually lean into the values and the principles and you apply them to your life, you're going to be a better person. You're going to deal with your emotion better. You're going to deal with adversity better. You're going to have better friendships because you actually empathize with each other because it's really hard. And when we take the game to the community, for years and years and years, we've been asking people in the community to come to golf. We've been wondering why don't we have more people of color? Why don't we have more women? Why don't we have more regular folks playing golf? And we know that the access and the cost is the issue. And we don't have to be a rocket science to understand that golf takes a lot of time. It also takes a lot of resources. And so we've been asking people to come to the game of golf. And I think at the USGA, we're going to get serious over the next 10 to 20 years to take the game of golf to the people, so that people shouldn't have to leave their environment. They should be able to meander down, just like I did growing up, meander down to the park and play basketball. It's right there. We want to take the game to the people. And so this Maggie Hathaway project is a real win for us. One, this golf course historically had been built in a predominantly African-American part of town. That part of town has fallen into a little bit of a, underserved situation, but it's a good community with good people. It's just like the community I grew up in. And so this is a way of us demonstrating that we really care. And, we don't do these things just because, oh my gosh, we only saved, this might help 500 golfers, but we do these things to inspire everyone in their community to think about what they could do. Look, when we doubled the women's purse last year in the US Open, we had the largest purse at $5.5 million. When we made the purse 10 million, guess what? 1 year later, everyone's purse came up. So sometimes it's not only that, one project might not reach that many people, but we want to use our platform to inspire more people. And so the Maggie Hathaway project, I think, is a good first step. Every year you will see us choose a project around the US Open to take the game of golf, to the people. And look, diversity and inclusion today can't mean, in order to lift up minorities, we got to punch down on white people. I like to say it really plain because, I work in construction, I work in architecture. We're a multi-billion-dollar company. That's what I do for a living. All my partners are Midwestern white guys. We have a couple of white gals, and so but sometimes we just got to be real with each other. I say, in order to hire small and minority businesses, it doesn't mean we need to grow the pie, so that we're not taking pie from one group to give it to the next. Mm-hmm. This is the beauty of America. We've always thought about how great can we make things so that we have abundance in our mind and not scarcity. When we think about taking one thing from another, that's scarcity value. So at the USGA, we keep thinking, how much bigger can we make this game so that we can share it with more people? Instead of thinking about how we take something from this group and give it to the next, let's think about how we build a greater tent. This is why I have not spent much time talking about Live Golf versus the PGA Tour. I love those guys. I love Jimmy Dunn, Ed. Those are my guys. I love them. And I'm glad they're taking the bullet, for the game. I wouldn't want to be standing in front of Congress testifying in the way they do. The Saudis, no doubt, we're going to spend this money. They might bankrupt the tour. But even when we get distracted and everyone wants to talk, I can't hit a ball, walk down the fairway. Hey, that's the first question people want to talk about. Here's the thing. That's a very small group of people it's visible, but it's a very small group of people. This is a big game. Okay, 100 million people around the world play golf. And so we want to keep making the game bigger and bigger so we can share it with more and more people. And that's what the Maggie Hathaway project is about. Instead of paying really, really rich golfers $1 or $2 or $3 million more in our purse, we would rather take the $1 or $2 or $3 million and spread this goodness back into the community and back into our cities so that more people get to experience the goodness we experience. And this is something that you will see us continuing to do, because we believe the world needs more demonstration today than it needs instruction. So we're trying to demonstrate to people this is what we care about, and this is how we'd like to spend our excess funds. And so, I think you can expect to see more and more of this.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you.
Fred, thanks.
I hope I stymied your live questions, by the way.
I think a very important point, and this is just myself talking about what makes this the greatest game of all, is that most of the time when we're on the field, when we're on the court, our 3.5 to 4.5 hours, we're not playing. So we get a chance to get to know each other. We get a chance to talk. We get a chance to celebrate that great shot. And we get a chance to ignore the shot that didn't work out so well. And particularly, Fred, in our philanthropic side, when we're working with our veterans or whatever our foundation main cause may be, that ability to play and grow together is just incredible. And, we've been fortunate, Fred, we've had Mike on twice, one as certainly CEO of the USGA, but also in his days as commissioner of the LPGA. Can see the absolute energy between the both of you. Fred, incredible. And Mike, we know that he's also redefined USGA a little bit, and you started to address it at the beginning, Fred, as unify, showcase, govern, and advance. So, you've been digging into the details of that, but I think what that does is more again, relate the associations to the people, to the game at all levels. And, we have many joint ventures together, the USGA and the PGA of America, and one that I think we're probably all particularly proud of is drive, chip, and putt.
No question.
To wind up on Sunday before the Masters. So a little bit about the Unify, Showcase, Govern, and Advance.
Yeah, I think, so Mike, first off, is a world-class leader. And you could see, like for me, I have had to completely up my coffee intake just to deal with Mike. I think long after my service as president, he'll be one of my great friends. I've learned a lot from him. It's so interesting. And all of you who are working for state golf associations know the tension between the volunteer leaders and sometimes the management team and the staff. But there is absolutely no tension. I think today, just positive affirmation between the executive committee and the management team. And that part of that is, I think Mike is a very healthy leader, very transparent. He is an open and willing collaborator. And this Unify, Showcase, Govern, and Advance, one of the things we wanted to do as we sought to find a new leader is we recognize the country has changed. And it doesn't mean that the USGA of the past was not valid for its time, but this notion that you could just be sort of, like a closed box and make decisions without having to communicate, without having to collaborate, is no longer acceptable in the world today. So it shouldn't be acceptable in golf. And so what you might find is today, the USGA is a much more collaborative organization. When we say unify, we think unify is certainly within the game. We set the, sort of handicapping rules so that every golfer of every skill level can play together. And that unify is really important to us. One of the really unique things about golf is we can all play with each other. I played golf with a very famous professional golfer not too long ago, and my 16-year-old daughter was playing with us. And here we've got one of the greatest players on earth with my 16-year-old daughter, who is a 22 index, and we've had different games going at different strokes. We're all playing. I assure you, I cannot go play basketball with LeBron James, but I can play basketball. I can play golf with the golf version of LeBron James. And so that's a very important piece to unify. But we're also trying to unify through how we spend our time. the state golf associations are absolutely critical to the vitality of golf in this country and the USGA. In fact, you could argue that sort of you all are our local representatives, and we got to make ourselves more available to spend more time so that we understand the issues at the state level, so that we can be better partners. Whether it's GIN, whether it's sort of our tournament apps, et cetera. But we need to figure out how we can be better for you, because we can't do what we do without the state golf associations. And then the PGA of America, like I live in Dallas, and so all the PGA executives live here in my hometown. We golf together on the weekends. In fact, we have a Craig Kessler on this call, but the Craig Kessler who just took over as the chief operating officer of the PGA of America is one of my mentees. We've been doing work together. He's a member of Trinity Forest, and we've been very close friends for a very long period of time. And so we need to make sure that part of our unification strategy is we get rid of this competitive tension. Look, once a year or twice a year, we're going to want to have slightly better championship than you do. But the world has never needed all of the leadership in golf more than it needs it now. So we want the PGA of America to be strong. We want the PGA Tour to be strong. We want to make sure that the R&A continues to do its work well. We'll do our work well. We want all of our state golf associations to do well, and we can't work well with people we don't know. So we have to make ourselves more available and get out there in the world of golf and spend time. So that unification is really important. The showcase we talked about already, so I'll go by quick. We're going to conduct the world's greatest championships on America's greatest golf courses, period, full stop. We welcome other people to also chase that dream too. So we wanting to have the best championships doesn't mean we don't see the brilliance of the PGA Championship or the Masters or the Open Championship. We want everyone to be wanting to be the best, and that's a way we can compete and drive ourselves forward together. When Augusta National does something really well, don't think we're not thinking about how we can do it too. And that's part of sort of that showcase, because all of our championships inspire more people into the game, not only to play elite golf, but to want to play all golf. The governance, nobody likes rules, but you need rules. I always said, as a architect and a builder, there's a real part of it that is really, reputational and relational. I like to be liked. Okay. Who doesn't like to be liked? Getting on the USGA board, I had to learn that there are times where we're gonna have to do things people don't like. But sometimes, growing up, I didn't like things that my elders told me, but I knew they were good for me. The USGA, the R&A is always being like your stern uncle or your stern aunt. You might not like all the things that they ask you to do, but long time and over time, you really appreciate that they exist. The golf ball goes too far. No one can tell me any different. Look at the length of golf courses we're playing today versus what we played 10, 15 years ago. It has the long-term impact of threatening the very vitality of the game. Out on the West Coast, you guys deal with water. In Europe, they're dealing with legislation that is targeted towards stopping the use of water. These things will trickle down into our country. We have to make some attempt before our elected officials impose it on us. We also know that longer, wider, bigger golf courses just lead to more expense, which leads to less inclusion. So maybe it's not the golf ball, maybe it's the clubs, maybe it's not the clubs, maybe it's the ball, maybe it's the condition of the turf. But we have to spend our time, our dollars, and our attention to make sure we're addressing, and we shouldn't have to put our thumbprints on Mona Lisas just to continue to challenge the greatest players on earth. Maybe the 0.001% of the players that are causing this issue, we ought to have strategies to address them. You may not agree with our solution, but I think you have to be honest and admit that there is an issue. And so this is something that the PGA of America and the USGA and R&A might not be on the same page, but we continue to talk. We're in notice and comment period, so I'm not going to comment much more, but we are listening, and we're spending all our time to listen, not because we want to do something to the great elite players Rory McIlroy hit a drive this week, 420 yards. They're going to make us build 9,000-yard golf courses to continue to challenge them. We don't believe that's the right step. We don't believe it's right for the environment. It's not right for the cost. It's not right for golf. So governance is a part of the deal. And we just, if you don't like governance, don't join the USGA. But the game of golf needs governance in order to continue to thrive. That's what we like about it: common rules, etc. And then we've talked a lot about advance. Advance takes on a lot of components, whether it's investing, $30 million a year in green section continue to innovate. You know, I was joking, the last 5 NFLs have been played on turf that the USGA invested in creating. And so when we actually spread this goodness into the game of golf, it also passes down throughout our society and community. We're going to keep doing that. We think a big part of advance is to actually demonstrate what equality, equity, and all that really feels like, and to give people an opportunity to see it in motion. And don't take for granted when Mike Wan and Fred Popol and Stu Francis and Len, if you and I walked into a place, like, we're showing people that it actually works to go live your life together. That's what golf gives us the opportunity to do every day, every Saturday. It gives us an opportunity to put our arms around each other and to demonstrate to our entire world and our community that everything gets better in your life when you lean in and you decide to live your life with other good people.
That's awesome. Well said, Fred. Thank you. I think key message that I'm taking away from you is that we're all better together. The unification, the collaboration. I mean, we collaborate with our friends up north. We have a great relationship and partnership with the SCGA. And we know that we're going to be better for it. And more importantly, our game is going to be better for it. So I appreciate all your great words and wisdom and your passion and your leadership, and can't thank you enough for joining us. And like I said, hopefully we'll run into you here in a couple of weeks at beautiful Bel Air for the Women's Amateur Championship. But thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You guys enjoy the rest of your meeting, and thank you for giving me the audience. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Fred.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Nikki, thank you. And thank you to Fred as president of the United States Golf Association. And now to Craig Kessler. Craig, as everyone knows, is the Director of Public Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, has been with us every week. As much as we've tried to run and hide, he still found out where we were and showed up. And so, Craig, there are always things going on in California. I know there was a legislative committee meeting this morning. AB 1910 has kind of come back again, rearing its head a little bit. I ask you to address that. And then the Speaker of the Assembly, Speaker Rivas, how that will affect us and everything else that we need to know. Craig, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. And just before I get to that, because something has happened with respect to AB 1910 or a successor bill since the last time we met on these chats, listening to Fred and hearing in the conversation, Pine Valley, Bel Air, LACC, I heard a few other great golf courses, what we call great golf courses, championship venues in there. Reminded me a little bit of a challenge I had many, many years ago when I was first at the SCGA, and our then executive director, Kevin Heaney, asked me to address a past President's Day. And of course, all those past presidents hadn't been around when the SCGA had ventured into, so boldly into the advocacy world. So as I stood up, I tried to explain to them what then was called government affairs was all about. And I said, all of you sort of came and you volunteered, and everyone in this room loves the game, and you were attracted by great championships, great golf courses, great venues, course rating, all the sexy, exciting things in golf. And I liken my position to a luxury ocean liner, because a lot of persons in the room had been on, had been, on those luxury liners. I said, and everything that attracted you to the SCGA is sort of on the, sort of on the, on the deck with the string quartets and the driving ranges and the shuffleboard courts and the great, and the great views of the ocean. Government affairs, or public affairs as we call it now, is down in the engine room where it's 120 degrees, shoveling coal, doing all the hard work, the grit, the grime, all the grubby stuff that keeps that top deck going. So in the spirit of that, I think you heard a little bit of the top deck today, and an exciting part of the top deck. Now I'm going to take you into the bowels of the luxury liner that we all live on called golf, and open up with what Len suggested. And that is maybe the resurrection, not in the immediate, but certainly next year, of our old favorite, whether it was 672 or AB 1910. I know Fred mentioned a little bit, legislation in Europe and some demonstrations in Europe, which, by the way, were at Sabonic in New York recently, in which there's some sense that golf courses shouldn't be receive water. We have those threats. Actually, we've handled that threat pretty well out here in the Southwest because we've been an extraordinarily good steward of the land and we've done a great deal in water conservation. But again, about 1 out of 4 golf courses in the state of California are municipal golf courses that are owned by governments. And to refresh your memories about AB 1910 or AB 672, it came in 2 versions of it. That was a bill that would have provided hundreds of millions of dollars in, subsidies, otherwise known as free government money, to municipalities and to developers to chop their municipal golf courses into housing complexes with a certain affordable quotient. Now, no other green space, no other park, no other open space, no land conservancies, nothing else would be offered up. Consequently, the only thing that would be offered up would be the golf courses, and that was golf's objection to it. Golf didn't object to participating perhaps in being thrown in with a number of other green space activities in California, and a couple of them get lost to solve an acute housing problem. That's our role as participating good citizens in the state of California, but that was the objection. So when Len suggested it's reared its ugly head again, on July 5th, I was awakened, like many others, to a set of editorials in something called the Southern California News Group, which is a huge consortium of Southern California newspapers that includes the Los Angeles Daily News, the Orange County Register, the Long Beach Press Telegram, the Riverside Press Enterprise, the Pasadena Star News, and the Torrance Daily Breeze. And I may have left 1 or 2 out. And there may be a connection, I believe, with the San Jose Mercury in that chain as well, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. Although it just, subsequent to July 5th, the Los Angeles Times sold it to the ownership group of that particular change, sold the San Diego Union Tribune. So there may be more newspapers. And their editorial was simply advocating for the resurrection of AB 1910. That would be next session. Len is correct. We had a California Alliance for Golf legislative call this morning, and our lobbyist confirmed that it would not surprise him in the least to see that come back in 2024, or maybe come back in a slightly different or parallel form. For those of you who get the SCGA public affairs updates, we certainly thoroughly briefed you on July 5th. I felt a little bit bad because what ended up under the fold on July 5th, and maybe I'll run it separately, were a lot of things that Fred just talked about in terms of many of the other good things that came out of the US Open in Los Angeles beyond simply the legacy project that he talked about at Maggie Hathaway. It was also the 1530 water initiatives and various other things. And that was originally going to run the day after Independence Day at the top as a bold headline. And of course, as so often happens in my life, when you work in public affairs, the world intervened and it ended up below the fold. So maybe it got a little bit diminished, and I feel bad about that, but blame the Southern California News Group. Simply say this: when you see an editorial like that, yes, the Southern California News Group is a very libertarian-leaning editorial board. And I want to point out to everyone, it's hard to characterize libertarianism is not necessarily, it's hard to put it on the political spectrum, but I can put the Southern California News Group on a political spectrum in the state of California. And when you compare it to the other major newspapers, the Chronicle, the LA Times, certainly the Sacramento Bee, and some of the others, it is far more conservative than the others. It actually endorses Republicans often. The other newspapers, not so much. I think everyone's aware of that. And so when you realize that when it comes to if we're feeling a little bit attacked, particularly in the public sector, those attacks come from all parts of the political spectrum. They may come as a surprise to you. And I also feel compelled to remind you that the Los Angeles Times is really quite sympathetic to our cause. Yes, in May of 2022, they ran an editorial that said that AB 1910 merited a conversation, but they also ran all of the things that we talk about the municipal game: affordability, accessibility, almost anti-Pine Valley and LACC. It's not those places. Average green fee of $38, diverse in every respect. They carried all of our arguments in a lead editorial. They also pointed out that there were at least 6 or 8 other areas to look at before you were to ever look at a municipal golf course or a park to put housing upon. And so in essence, at the end of the day, their editorial was, it's worth the conversation because housing is such a problem. However, it's pretty much a bad idea. So I want everyone to remember that moving forward, where our political sweet spot may be on something like that. And it's something I've been saying for a very, very long time. Our political sweet spot and most of our sympathy for our game comes from quarters that most of people listening on this call would probably be surprised. But give me a call offline. I think I'm a pretty public fellow. You know how to get in touch with me, and as you can tell, I'm not hard to engage in a particular conversation. I will say this. I think based on this morning's call, we're going to immediately do our best. I would be dishonest with you if I didn't share with you that in the year, in more than a year since I think this industry in this state put on a magnificent campaign in killing off AB 672 and AB 1910. Magnificent in the sense that we avoided every trap. We made sure that we would never be pitted against housing. It was never going to be golf versus housing. It was going to be much broader issues. And we were very careful to run with the strengths of our argument, which, by the way, you heard this from me before. Boy, there's a great piece in Canadian newspapers today that kind of makes the point that I've been making, that when it comes to efficient, good economic use of 100 to 200 acres in urban areas, urban Canada or urban America, and America is a lot more urbanized than Canada, we're a terrible proposition economically. We're a great proposition environmentally, culturally, socially, and in every other respect. And those are the arguments we ran with in 1910, and those are the arguments we'll run with again. And I'll keep shouting from the mountaintops until people tune me out entirely, that when it comes to perhaps alternative recreational uses of open space, particularly passive uses, those drain the public purse. Golf, on the other hand, fills the public purse. But when it comes to the jobs, the economic multiplier effects, and particularly the tax receipts, golf's not a very high and good use of property. And that's not its justification. And those are not the arguments that we ran with in 1910. And dare I suggest that's one of the reasons that we won. The second reason is that we surprised them. And that is because never before in the history of California had golf ever, any organization, tapped its actual real live constituent voting members. And in this state, north of 3 million persons play golf, and hundreds of thousands of them have it as a way of life and take it very, very seriously. And when the SCGA alerted at least our membership in the southern half of the state and simply pointed out the facts and gave them a simple way to contact their legislatures with whatever their opinion might be on AB 1910, those legislators heard loud and clear that golf was a passion in this state, and that maybe as a traditional political lobby, we're extraordinarily weak. And we are, there's no doubt about that. Despite all the talk you hear about advocacy, we're simply very much junior players in that. However, we had something going then that we have going now, and I dare say about the only really good thing we have it going, other than a few good strategists, is people power. And that everywhere in this state, there are people who play golf and love the game and took great offense at being singled out as if somehow golf was a pariah that needed to be sacrificed up, it and only it, moving forward. I've gone into this, lengthy, it's almost amounted to a bit of a diatribe that brought in a few other subjects. So simply to point out that things are never over. So 1910 was never over. I regret that we did not have a more robust response in recognizing that, yes, we surprised them by unleashing the people power in golf in 2022, but you only surprise people once. They're now aware of that. So to the degree to which the running of this editorial maybe represents putting some oxygen back into the life of something that as long as there was a Speaker Rendon and a set of committee chairs and old arrangements, and those are about to go by as of September 15th, it wasn't worth trying again in 2023. But at least a substantial group of newspapers believe it's something that someone ought to give a shot to in 2024. And dare I say, we ought to be ready, readier than we are right now when we get to 2024. And when it gets down to it, that means commitment. It means organization, and at the end of the day, it means resources. Because I can tell you, as maybe the person who was most at the center of the AB 1910 campaign, there were junctions in there. There were moments of great, sometimes in life you get lucky, just like you do in golf, and sometimes you get unlucky. We had some luck in 2022, 2021 and 2022 with both of those bills. Yes, we did a really good job. But Len, Nikki, and others who have spent a lot of time on those California Alliance for Golf legislative calls know that from the very beginning of that, our lobbyist in Sacramento told us, you folks can do everything not only right, but brilliantly, and you could easily lose this the way things are being structured. That's something we ought to remember going forward. And sad to say, because of the golf, almost uniquely among similarly sized and situated sectors, invests less into advocacy than other sectors, less than nurserymen, less than landscapers. Yes, we're not the Western State Petroleum Association. We're not the trial lawyers. We're not we're not teachers unions, and we're not building trades. We all know those are big political players with big political war chests. That's not us. That's never going to be us. But the state's nurserymen, landscapers, restaurants, 60-70% of the restaurants go out of business every year. Talk about volatility. And yet when you go to Sacramento, they invest 7 figures every year in staffs and advocacy functions. We don't have that, which means that if we gin up our people power one time too many and they just get a little bored with it and don't show up, we will lose something like a 1910. And that puts into jeopardy. When I said almost 1 out of 4, I had the reason to do the math in 2022. It's actually 22.3% of our state's golf stock, and that's all the places. And speaking of working working at the bottom of the ship, in the engine room, the places that Kevin Fitzgerald and I visit, Mission Bay or Rancho Duarte or Azusa Greens, or it's coming back, by the way, or Maggie Hathaway, spent a lot of time there. And I want to pay a little homage before I close this particular conversation, because there have been, I'm actually old enough and knew Maggie Hathaway. And I personally know a lot of persons at that particular facility in South Los Angeles who have, for all of those decades, have kept the game. They so love the game and have so passionate about the game. They have kept that facility alive and vibrant. They've kept junior golf programs. They have kept scholarship programs, things of real laudable nature. And yes, I couldn't be happier that the USGA and the SCGA as well, and so many others, are going to come in and allow that community to do an easier and better job of keeping the game of golf available in a community where it might have died out but for them. But let's not forget those on the ground who kept that flame alive for a lot of years and are going to be not so much the beneficiaries. They're going to take the largesse that the rest of the game has brought in conjunction with the 2023 US Open. And they're the ones on the ground that are going to make it work. And they're the ones that I think Kevin Fitzgerald and I spend a lot of time with every day, down in that engine room, laboring, whether it's on legislation or regulation or media relations, or simply going from place to place to place, from planning commissions to parks commissions to water boards and so forth and so on. That's where the real work, that's where this really hits the ground. That's where the real work is done. It's not done in the Capitol days. It's not done in the performative acts. It's not done at the press conferences. I attend those too, and they have their place. The real work is painstakingly difficult. It's laborious. It's hard. It deals with people. It deals with communities. And above all else, it deals with elected leaders. And I say particularly more. So with that, And I was sorry, I was a little bit around all over the map and so forth, but I had a hard act to follow today, Nikki and Len, because Fred's a pretty dynamic and articulate guy. But he kind of got my attention with the Pine Valley and the Bel Air and the Pebble Beach and the LACC and all the places we're all golfers on this particular call, and we all love to play those places. But the fate of the game will be decided at the Maggie Hathaways, the Pico Riveras, the Mission Bays, all those little places that are not great facilities, but the great facilities don't exist but for them. And they're the ones that are on the chopping block right now. And they're the ones that all of us, and those of us who work in organizations that purport to be leaders, have to get out in front and do our best to save them for future generations. And dare I say, even for the Pine Valleys and the Bel Airs of this country. Thanks for having me on again. And I hope you invite me in the future.
That's up for discussion with the committee, but I think your chances are good. Thank you, Craig. We appreciate everything you do, certainly not only for the SCGA, but for all of us and working on our behalf and for the California Alliance for Golf. And appreciate you always keeping us up to date on what we should be paying attention to and what's happening out there. So appreciate you being on, and we look forward to having you on with us next month.
Thanks, Nikki. And to everyone, again, thank you for joining us, to Mr. Perpall and Craig. Of course, as Nikki said, keeping us honest and keeping us conscious of what we need to be. It's a wonderful weekend of golf. And again, with the second round of the Open Championship on in the Barracuda, please be sure to enjoy those this weekend. And Nikki, I think we said August 25, right? We'll shoot for August 25. In the meantime, everyone have a great weekend. Continue to look out for each other and after each other. Thank you so much for the continued support, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you. Thanks, Lynn.